My cousin had it all handed to him. New cars, private school, everything. But at Thanksgiving dinner, when he learned I was worth $10 million, he completely lost it in front of everyone. My aunt yelled, and my dad just sat there. What if the person who always looked down on you, the one who had everything handed to them, suddenly found out you were secretly worth $10 million? And what if that revelation happened at Thanksgiving dinner, sparking an absolute, family-shattering meltdown? Because that's my story, and trust me, it was something else. My name is Anastasia, and I just turned 32. Growing up, I constantly watched my cousin, Jackson, get everything handed to him on a silver platter. New cars, private schools, expensive vacations, designer clothes, you name it, he had it. Meanwhile, I worked for every single thing I ever had. My parents were solid middle class. My dad was an electrical engineer, my mom a second-grade teacher. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house, and money? We were careful with it. Every purchase was planned. Every expense tracked in my mom's meticulous notebook. My dad would always say, "Money doesn't grow on trees, Anastasia. If you want something special, you need to work for it." That philosophy shaped my entire childhood. When I wanted a new bike at 8, I spent months doing chores, collecting bottles for recycling, saving every birthday dollar. The pride I felt when I finally earned that blue Schwinn was indescribable. Then there was Jackson's family. My Uncle Josh and Aunt Melanie lived in a sprawling 6-bedroom mansion with a pool, tennis court, and a 3-car garage filled with vehicles that cost more than my parents' annual salaries combined. Uncle Josh inherited a successful manufacturing business and expanded it, making them the wealthy branch of our family tree. Jackson, 2 years older than me, was their golden child. He never had to wait for anything. While I saved for months for a $20 toy, Jackson would casually mention something he liked, and it would be waiting for him the next day. The contrast between our lives became painfully apparent during family gatherings. I still vividly remember Jackson's 10th birthday. They rented out an entire indoor water park for the occasion. When it came time to open presents, he tore through package after package of expensive toys with barely a pause. The grand finale was a brand new gaming console, just released that week, along with 15 different games. He barely managed a half-hearted thanks before moving on to the next shiny distraction. 3 months earlier, for my 8th birthday, I'd received a new backpack, some books, and a simple digital watch that I treasured because my parents remembered I'd mentioned wanting one 6 months prior. The difference wasn't just about money. It was about expectations and gratitude. "Your cousins have different values than we do," my mother explained when I asked why Jackson had so much more. "We believe in teaching you the value of things, not just giving them to you." As we grew older, that wealth gap created a real divide. By our preteen years, Jackson had developed this air of superiority. He'd make comments about my clothes, asking why I wore the same jacket 2 Christmases in a row, or why my sneakers had scuff marks. He'd parade his latest gadgets, knowing I couldn't afford similar ones. "Dad says people who work for other people will never be truly successful," he once told me during a 4th of July gathering when I was 11. He says employees are just helping someone else get rich. I didn't know how to respond. My parents both worked for others, and they seemed perfectly happy. But his words planted this tiny seed of doubt that would resurface whenever I saw the material differences in our lives. There were moments when the inequality just stung. When my old laptop died in 8th grade while I was working on a school project, my parents said we'd have to wait until next month for my dad's bonus. That very same weekend, I overheard Aunt Melanie casually mention they'd just bought Jackson his 2nd computer that year because he wanted one with better graphics for gaming. The envy was certainly there, watching him float through life without financial constraints. But mostly there was a quiet determination growing inside me, a desire to prove that hard work and perseverance could be just as valuable as having things handed to you. Little did I know how dramatically our paths would diverge, or how those early lessons would shape the person I'd become. High school only amplified these differences. I went to the local public school, Jackson went to Westfield Academy, an exclusive private school with tuition higher than some colleges. His uniform cost more than my entire wardrobe. I got my first job at a local coffee shop, working weekends and after school, saving every penny for college. My parents were clear. They'd help, but scholarships and part-time jobs would fill the gaps. Meanwhile, Jackson turned 16 and got a brand new BMW convertible as a birthday present. I still remember him revving the engine in our driveway. "Sweet ride, right?" he boasted. "Dad, let me pick the color and everything. 0 miles." I nodded politely, internally calculating that his car cost about 5 years of my coffee shop salary. That same week, I'd been thrilled to find a pair of jeans on the clearance rack. "What are you driving these days, Anastasia?" he asked, knowing full well I didn't have a car. "I'm saving up," I replied, trying to maintain my dignity. "Planning to buy something reliable next year." He laughed, not unkindly, but with genuine confusion. "Why not just ask your parents? A sweet 16 without a car is kind of sad, don't you think?" That was Jackson's worldview in a nutshell. The idea of not being able to afford something or choosing to save was utterly foreign to him. During junior year, my aging $1,500 Honda Civic broke down. The repair was $800, money I didn't have as everything was going towards college. In a moment of desperation, I swallowed my pride and called Jackson, asking to borrow money, promising to pay him back with interest. "Sorry, that's a lot of cash," he said, sounding genuinely regretful, but making no real effort to help. "Have you asked your parents? Or maybe get a credit card?" That evening, my Instagram feed showed Jackson at an expensive restaurant with friends, the caption, "Impromptu dinner." Why not? The bill in the corner of the photo would have covered my car repairs twice over. I ended up picking up extra shifts and borrowing $200 from my best friend. That experience taught me 2 valuable lessons. Never count on financial help from Jackson, and always keep an emergency fund. Our high school graduations were vastly different. Mine was a simple affair at the football stadium, followed by a backyard barbecue. I received a laptop for college and a $500 check. Jackson's, an ornate performing arts center, local dignitaries, and a lavish party at a country club with a live band and catering that must have cost thousands. His gift, a brand new Range Rover with a massive red bow. As the well-dressed crowd oohed and awed, I stood back and watched him. He seemed pleased, but not surprised or particularly grateful. It was simply what he'd come to expect. "You heading to state in the fall, right?" he asked me later, referring to the public university I'd be attending. "Yes, I got a partial scholarship," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. That scholarship was the result of countless late nights studying and maintaining a 4.0 GPA. Cool, he nodded absently. "I'm going to Princeton. Legacy admission. You know how it is. Dad made some calls." I didn't know how it was, actually. My admission had been earned through grades, test scores, and carefully crafted essays, not family connections. But I just smiled politely. College was both harder and more rewarding than I'd anticipated. My partial scholarship covered about 60% of tuition, leaving me responsible for the rest. I worked as a research assistant and picked up weekend shifts at a restaurant. The schedule was brutal, often leaving me with just 5 or 6 hours of sleep. But I was determined to graduate without crushing debt. I majored in software engineering, one of the few women in a program dominated by men. There were nights I cried from exhaustion and frustration. Meanwhile, Jackson's social media showcased elaborate fraternity parties, weekend trips to NYC, and spring breaks in tropical locations. Every few months, he'd change his major. "Mom and Dad don't care what I study as long as I get the Princeton degree," he explained during a rare phone conversation. "The connections are what matter anyway, not the classes." During my junior year, I had a breakthrough. In an advanced algorithms class, Professor Amanda Martinez, one of the few female faculty members, asked me to stay after class. You have a unique way of thinking about system architecture, she said. Have you considered where you want to intern? I admitted I'd been too focused on paying for school, and prestigious internships were often unpaid, a luxury I couldn't afford. Professor Martinez shook her head. Let me introduce you to some former students of mine. They started a small tech company, Visu. They're looking for talented interns. It's paid, and if you impress them, it could lead to something more. I interviewed the next week. Visu was a startup focused on visualization software for complex datasets, working out of a converted warehouse. I was offered an internship on the spot with a salary that allowed me to reduce my restaurant hours. From day one, I threw myself into the work. While other interns kept strict 9 to 5 schedules, I often stayed until midnight, fascinated by the problems we were solving. The founding team noticed my dedication. By the end of the summer, the CEO, Michael, called me into his office. We want you to stay on part-time during the school year, he said. 20 hours a week, flexible around your classes. And we want to offer you something else. He slid a document across the desk. It was an offer of a small equity stake in the company. Fractions of a percentage point, but real ownership. You think like an owner, not an employee, Michael explained. We want to make that official. This could be worth nothing, or it could be worth something someday if we succeed. I signed that day, but told no one in my family about the equity. It seemed too abstract, too much like counting chickens before they hatched. Instead, I simply mentioned I had a good part-time job in my field, which everyone took as another example of my work ethic. During holiday breaks, I'd occasionally see Jackson. He was now sporting designer clothes with European labels and talking incessantly about his network of important connections. He'd settled on economics, though he complained constantly about the workload and admitted to paying other students to complete some of his assignments. College is just a formality, he insisted. Dad already has a position waiting for me at the company after graduation. Executive track from day one. I just nodded and changed the subject. While Jackson was coasting through college on his father's reputation, I was building something from scratch, developing skills and relationships based on my own merit. As graduation approached, Visu offered me a full-time position with a modest but fair salary and additional equity options. The company had grown from 8 employees to nearly 30, with a client list that included several Fortune 500 companies. I accepted immediately, excited to help build something meaningful. Little did I know that decision would lead to a financial windfall beyond anything I could have imagined and create a seismic shift in my relationship with my entitled cousin. 3 years after graduation, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael, our CEO. All hands emergency meeting, 10 minutes, main conference room. My stomach dropped. In startup culture, emergency meetings usually meant 2 things. Either the company was shutting down or something monumental had happened. Given our recent struggles for additional funding, I immediately feared the worst. I hurried to the conference room, where tension and confusion filled the air. Michael entered, followed by our executive team, their expressions unreadable. "I'll cut straight to the point," Michael said, his voice wavering slightly. 30 minutes ago, we signed the final papers. Data Corp has acquired Visu for $200 million. The room erupted. People were hugging, crying, high-fiving, calling their families. My mind went blank. Later that afternoon, after hours of champagne celebration, I received an email with the equity calculation. As an early employee with accumulated options, my stake amounted to slightly over 5% of the company. The acquisition translated to $10.2 million for me before taxes. I stared at the number on my screen, unable to comprehend it. Just 5 years earlier, I'd been working double shifts to afford textbooks. Now, at 27 years old, I was a millionaire many times over. In the days that followed, I met with financial advisors. I paid off my student loans, bought a modest but comfortable condo in a neighborhood I'd only dreamed of affording, and set aside funds to help my parents with their retirement. Beyond these practical steps, I made few immediate changes to my lifestyle. What I didn't do was tell anyone about my windfall, with the exception of my parents. After careful consideration, we agreed to keep the exact amount private. There's no reason everyone needs to know your financial situation, my father advised. Money changes how people see you, sometimes in ways you wouldn't expect. His words proved prescient, though not in the way either of us anticipated. Around the same time, Jackson had graduated from Princeton with mediocre grades, but an impressive list of social connections. Despite every advantage, he struggled to find meaningful employment. After several half-hearted attempts at entry-level positions that he quit within months, declaring them beneath his potential, he eventually landed at his father's company in an ambiguous role, Strategic Development Associate. From what I gathered through family gossip, the position involved little actual responsibility, but came with a generous salary, a company car, and an expense account that Jackson utilized extensively. Uncle Josh hoped his son would grow into a legitimate role, but evidence of such growth remained elusive. During a rare phone conversation with Aunt Melanie, she expressed frustration that bordered on embarrassment regarding Jackson's professional trajectory. "We've given him every advantage," she lamented. "The best schools, connections, opportunities. I don't understand why he's struggling when other young people seem to manage just fine." There was a pointed quality to her comment that suggested a comparison to me, though she didn't mention me by name. It took considerable restraint not to point out that perhaps those advantages had actually disadvantaged Jackson in developing resilience and work ethic. Instead, I murmured sympathetic noises and changed the subject. Over the years, I'd learned that discussing the differences in our upbringings only led to tension. Aunt Melanie and Uncle Josh remained firmly convinced that their parenting approach had been superior, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. As the years passed, my investment portfolio grew under careful management, while my career advanced through genuine accomplishment. I found the work engaging and the compensation more than adequate, with the added satisfaction of knowing my bank account held a cushion most people could scarcely imagine. The most significant change in my life wasn't material but psychological. The financial security allowed me to make decisions based on what truly mattered to me rather than economic necessity. I could take professional risks, volunteer for causes I believed in, and help friends in need without worrying about my own stability. Meanwhile, Jackson's Instagram feed told the story of someone desperately maintaining the appearance of success while contributing little of value. Photos of business lunches, networking events, and motivational captions about hustling seemed designed to convince others, and perhaps himself, that he was building something meaningful. The collision of our divergent paths was perhaps inevitable, though I never anticipated how dramatic it would be when it finally occurred. The catalyst would be a family Thanksgiving dinner that would permanently alter our extended family dynamics and force a long overdue reckoning with the consequences of privilege without purpose. The invitation arrived via text message on a crisp October morning. It was from Uncle Josh, though I suspected Aunt Melanie dictated it. My stomach nodded. It had been nearly 3 years since I'd attended a family Thanksgiving at their house. I'd made excuses about work or travel, choosing instead to spend the holiday with my parents or friends who felt more like family. The thought of spending an entire evening listening to Jackson boast about imaginary accomplishments, while Aunt Melanie made subtle jabs about my modest lifestyle, made me want to craft another polite refusal. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was time to stop avoiding these gatherings. After all, I had nothing to prove to them, and maybe my perspective had shifted enough that their performative wealth wouldn't bother me anymore. I replied with a simple, "I'll be there. Thanks for the invitation." That evening, I called my parents. My mother sounded apprehensive. "Are you sure you want to go, sweetheart?" she asked. The last time was rather uncomfortable for everyone. She was referring to a Christmas dinner 2 years prior, when Jackson had spent the entire evening describing his executive role at his father's company, making pointed remarks about people who lacked ambition, all while glancing in my direction. I'd maintained my composure, but my father had nearly lost his temper before my mother smoothly changed the subject. "I think I'm in a different place now," I assured her. "Their opinions don't affect me the way they used to. Besides, it might be nice for us all to be together for once." What I didn't mention was a small, petty part of me that wanted to observe Jackson's inflated sense of importance, now that I secretly had more financial security than he likely ever would. Not that I planned to reveal anything, but knowing it gave me a certain immunity to his posturing. As Thanksgiving approached, I found myself oddly preoccupied with what to bring as a gift. In previous years, I'd brought modestly priced wine or homemade desserts, accepted with a faint hint of condescension. This year, I could afford something impressive, but that felt like playing into their materialistic value system. After considerable thought, I decided on a balance, a limited edition bottle of bourbon that Uncle Josh had once admired, along with a handwritten card expressing genuine gratitude. It was neither ostentatious nor inadequate, a small reflection of my evolving relationship with money. The week before Thanksgiving, I had dinner with David, who had been my college boyfriend briefly before we realized we worked better as friends. He'd since become a successful financial advisor and was one of the few people who knew about my windfall, having helped me structure some of my early investments. "So, you're voluntarily going to spend Thanksgiving with the people who have been condescending to you your entire life?" he asked incredulously. "That's either very enlightened of you or completely masochistic." I laughed. Maybe a bit of both. I just feel like I've been avoiding them for years, and maybe it's time to stop giving them that power. David nodded thoughtfully. "Just promise me one thing. If Jackson starts his usual routine, you'll at least consider dropping the tiniest hint about your actual net worth. The look on his face would be worth the family drama." "That's exactly what I'm not going to do," I insisted, though I couldn't help smiling at the image. "The whole point is that I don't need external validation anymore." "Very mature," David conceded. "But my offer stands if you change your mind. I'd even be willing to crash Thanksgiving dessert as your fake financial advisor with an urgent matter regarding your 8-figure portfolio if you give me the signal." On Thanksgiving morning, I woke early and spent extra time getting ready, selecting a simple but elegant outfit that projected quiet confidence without obvious designer labels. The contradiction wasn't lost on me, caring about my appearance for people I claimed not to need approval from, but I rationalized it as armor rather than appeasement. The drive to Uncle Josh and Aunt Melanie's suburban mansion took 45 minutes, each mile increasing the tension. Their house looked exactly as I remembered. Imposing, perfectly maintained, with professional holiday decorations and a circular driveway now filled with luxury vehicles, including what I assumed was Jackson's latest acquisition, a gleaming black Tesla. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the bourbon, a bouquet of flowers, and my resolve before walking to the front door. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Aunt Melanie, impeccably dressed and coiffed, stood there. "Anastasia! Darling, you made it!" she exclaimed with manufactured enthusiasm, air-kissing both my cheeks. "It's been far too long. Come in, come in. Everyone's in the great room." I followed her through the marble foyer. My parents spotted me immediately, my father raising his glass in greeting while my mother disengaged from a conversation to embrace me. And then there was Jackson, holding court near the fireplace, gesturing expansively as he spoke to our younger cousins. He'd put on weight since I'd last seen him, his expensive suit slightly strained, his face fuller, his hair already thinning despite being only 34. When he caught sight of me, there was a momentary flash of something, perhaps insecurity, quickly masked by his usual bravado. "Well, well, the prodigal cousin returns," he called out, making sure everyone heard him. I was beginning to think you were avoiding us, Anastasia." I smiled pleasantly, determined not to let him set the tone. "Hello, Jackson. It's good to see you two. Happy Thanksgiving." I had no way of knowing then that this forced pleasantry would be among the last civil words exchanged between us that evening, or that in a few short hours the carefully maintained facade of family harmony would shatter beyond repair. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space used so infrequently it had a faintly artificial quality, like a stage set. The table was immaculately set with Aunt Melanie's heirloom china, sterling silver, and crystal glasses that caught the light from the ostentatious chandelier. Place cards directed each guest to their assigned seat, a level of formality that seemed excessive for a family gathering. I found myself seated between my mother and Uncle Josh's sister, Margaret, with Jackson directly across from me, a positioning that felt deliberately orchestrated to maximize opportunity for comparison. My parents exchanged a knowing glance as we took our seats, my father giving me a subtle wink of encouragement. The initial conversation flowed pleasantly enough as dishes were passed and wine poured. We covered safe topics: the unusually mild weather, recent films, mild family gossip. I began to think perhaps I had overestimated the potential for discomfort. That illusion was shattered when Uncle Josh raised his glass in an impromptu toast. Before we officially begin, I'd like to recognize some exciting developments. As many of you know, Jackson has recently been promoted to Director of Strategic Initiatives at J&M Manufacturing. A murmur of congratulations circled the table. I maintained my polite smile, though I knew from industry contacts that Director of Strategic Initiatives was precisely the sort of vague title created for people with connections rather than qualifications. Furthermore, Uncle Josh continued, he's spearheading our expansion into the Asian market with a new product line he conceptualized himself. Jackson beamed with self-satisfaction, nodding at the admiring comments from relatives who didn't know enough to question these claims. My father caught my eye briefly, his expression carefully neutral, but his thoughts were transparent to me. We both knew J&M Manufacturing had been attempting to enter the Asian market for years without success, and that any new initiative was likely the work of the actual executive team, not Josh's son. Anastasia! Aunt Melanie turned to me with exaggerated interest. How are things at your little tech company? Still enjoying the 9-to-5 world? Before I could respond, Jackson interjected. Don't be modest, Aunt Melanie. I'm sure Anastasia's role is very important. What was the title again, cousin? Senior developer? Project coordinator. I'm the integration team lead, I replied evenly. After our acquisition, I've been managing how our technology is implemented within the parent company's existing systems. Acquisition. Uncle Josh perked up, business interest momentarily overriding family politics. I hadn't heard about that. Who bought your startup? Data Corp acquired us last year, I said, deliberately downplaying the significance. It's been a positive transition overall. Jackson's expression flickered briefly, recognition of Data Corp's industry standing registering before he regained his composure. Well, that must be nice, having a stable corporate parent. Much less stressful than real entrepreneurship, I imagine. I chose not to point out that he had never entrepreneured anything in his life, instead taking a bite of turkey and complimenting Aunt Melanie on the meal. The conversation shifted to other topics as we progressed through multiple courses. Throughout dinner, Jackson repeatedly steered the conversation back to his supposed business acumen, describing meetings with key Asian investors and revolutionary product developments, in terms vague enough to be meaningless to anyone with actual business experience. Started new job today, not at family business. Entry level at marketing firm downtown. His choice. Thought you might like to know. The message, devoid of her usual emotional manipulation or passive aggression, seemed like an olive branch of sorts. I responded with simple encouragement. That's a big step. Wishing him well. Through the family grapevine, I later learned more details. After the Thanksgiving revelation, Jackson had apparently gone through something of an identity crisis, culminating in a decision to try building a career without his father's connections or financial support. It was the first job he'd ever gotten entirely on his own merits. And despite the entry-level position being a significant step down from his fabricated executive role, there was word he was actually applying himself with unexpected diligence. Meanwhile, I had been doing some soul-searching of my own. The financial security that had once seemed like a private victory now felt like it carried responsibility. After consultations with financial advisors and considerable thought, I established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying technology fields, specifically those who are working while pursuing their education. The initial endowment was $2 million, enough to support 10 students annually with tuition and stipends. I named it after my parents, honoring the values they had instilled in me rather than seeking personal recognition. When the local paper ran a small piece about the new scholarship, I sent the clipping to my extended family without comment. It wasn't about proving anything to them, but rather about demonstrating through actions rather than words what wealth meant to me. An opportunity to create opportunity for others. A full year passed before I saw Jackson again. It was at a cousin's wedding in neutral territory, where family politics were temporarily suspended in service of celebration. He approached me during the reception, noticeably thinner than at Thanksgiving. His designer suit replaced by something more modest, but better fitting. "Hey," he said awkwardly, extending his hand. "It's been a while." I shook it, searching his face for signs of the hostility that had defined our last encounter. Instead, I found something unexpected: humility. "I hear you've been making changes," I offered, giving him an opening. He nodded, glancing down at his seltzer water rather than the champagne others carried. "Turns out starting over is harder than starting from scratch." "Who knew?" "Everyone who's ever had to do it," I replied, but without malice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. Listen, I'm not good at this kind of thing, but I owe you an apology. What I said at Thanksgiving, how I behaved, it wasn't about you. It was never really about you." "I know," I said simply. "The scholarship thing," he continued, that was really something. Mom showed me the article. It made me think about what I would do if I suddenly had that kind of money. And I realized I had no idea beyond buying stuff I didn't need. That was a wake-up call. We talked for nearly an hour, not about money or success or the past, but about the challenges of figuring out who you are when all the external markers you've relied on are stripped away. For perhaps the first time in our lives, we spoke as equals, each acknowledging our own struggles and growth without comparison or judgment. As the years have passed, my relationship with wealth has evolved. I've learned that money itself is neutral, neither inherently corrupting nor ennobling. What matters is the relationship we choose to have with it, the values that guide our decisions about earning, spending, saving, and sharing. The jealousy I once felt watching Jackson get handed everything now seems like wasted energy. In truth, I was given something far more valuable than material advantages. I was given the chance to discover my own strength, to build confidence through achievement rather than acquisition, to find satisfaction in effort rather than entitlement. And Jackson? He's still figuring things out, still untangling the complicated legacy of privilege without purpose. We're not close, but there's a mutual respect that was impossible before. Sometimes the greatest gifts require the most painful unwrapping. The $10 million changed my life, but not in the ways most people might expect. The true freedom it provided wasn't freedom from work or worry, but freedom from external validation, from the need to prove my worth through possessions or titles, or the approval of others who measure success by different standards. True wealth, I've discovered, isn't about what you have, but what you value. It's about building a life aligned with your deepest principles rather than others' expectations. It's about recognizing that being handed everything often means developing nothing within yourself, while earning your way means becoming someone who can never be diminished by circumstance or others' opinions. If you've ever felt like the underdog in your family or watched others get handed opportunities you had to fight for, remember that the struggles that seem unfair are often the very experiences developing your most valuable qualities. The things we work hardest for become the foundations we can never lose. What are your thoughts on entitlement versus earning your way? Have you experienced similar family dynamics where money or status caused a huge rift? I really want to hear what you think down in the comments below.